Why, hello, my dear friends. Mike Amore, WCA Week 6 update. We are not going to see each other this upcoming Sunday because of the Thanksgiving break. I hope you will enjoy your day off and spend some time with your family and do lots of chess. Okay, my friends, here we go. We are looking at a master game and a position that at first glance looks really strange to some of you, because I know it looks strange to me. The reason this looks so strange is primarily, look at this king here on g8. And when you see a king on a square like this, you know something crazy happened in the opening. And it did. And I'm going to show you the opening. But before I get there, I want to talk about this position in particular, because what we've been doing in the classes is we're starting to talk about what to do when there's no clear tactic. For example, if I showed you this position out of the blue, it's like, here, what do you think's going on? The first step is always count the points, right? So right now I'm circling the queen here. Both teams have a queen. Both teams have 3 minor pieces, 2 rooks. Black is up a pawn, right? It's 7 pawns to 6. Always start with the material. And I learned a long time ago why that's important. When you have a position like this that's not moving, this is called a set position. It's like frozen in time. It's just not going to move for a while. That can be a little boring. They say you shouldn't make videos that don't have some action right away. Like I should be spinning this queen around to get your attention. But as chess players, I don't think I have to do that. I think you're able to focus well enough on the board. Okay, after you count the material, talk about the pieces in particular. Are there any that you like? Like this queen here is clearly well placed. I mean, she's dominating the center of the board. And if she can stick around there, that's going to give black a problem. Black has 2 bishops. White only has 1. So if this board ever opens up, we've already talked about the value of having 2 bishops. If you talk about pawn structure, and it's a great thing to remember, the pawns tell you where you can and cannot go, right? So, with these 2 black pawns in the middle of the board, this knight just can't hop out to c3 without losing a piece. So pawns really help the pieces. They're like little road maps. If this bishop leaves the house one of these days and the f8 square opens, that would be a really good line for like this guy here, for a rook. If you have this pawn structure as black, your pieces have to play in that pawn structure. So make sure you find a way to maybe hide the king here. Now, right now, you can't do that because of Big Mama. I know. Luca, stop pulling your sister's hair. Okay. Yeah, I see what you guys are doing when you watch these videos. Nobody knows who the real Josh is. Right, Serafina? Okay. Anyway, let's go. Anything else I want to talk about in this position? If I asked whose king is safer, I think a lot of you would say, well, clearly white, because white can castle in 1 move, and you would have a really, really good point. As a matter of fact, white does castle in this very position. The black king, even though he is on this strange square, can actually live for a very long time. Now, this g8 square pops up in other openings as well, and I want to show you one really, really quick here. If we have e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, which we've seen so many times, bishop c4 is a very common move, right? Okay, what if white instead goes for the 4 knights position and now plays bishop to c4? We can play this center fork trick, right? Well, once black has this knight captured, they're going to fork in the middle of the board, but don't forget that white can always say to you, you know what, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to take the pawn on f7. You're going to have to take. You have to move your king anyway. Now I'll take your knight. And when you play d5, it's not a fork, so the material is still equal. But white gets to play this awesome check. Well, it looks awesome anyway. Guess where the king goes in this position? That's right, g8. And then at some point, this pawn is going to push toward the middle of the board, kick the knight, and you're going to have the same structure down here that you had at the beginning position, right? Let's take a look. Here we go. This is what we're looking at. Does this look familiar with the king and rook like this? Okay, fine. Now, white can get their pawn back right now if they want to. They can get the pawn back by simply taking it, but I don't think white wanted to deal with these pins in the middle of the board, because remember, whenever you take an e-pawn with your king still sitting on e1, you have to watch out for tricks. Now, white can get away with it, but I don't think white was interested in going down that road. So instead, they castle in this position. Now, I want to go back one move really quick. Right before white castles, do you have any idea why I highlighted the 4 rooks? Did I? Oh, yeah, I did. Look at that. And does anyone know how I'm able to actually fill those in with my green marker so quickly? I'm really, really good at this now. You see how fast I just painted them? And look, I can just erase them, paint them. Yeah, it's like magic. The reason those rooks are highlighted, one of the concepts of middle game chess is the connection of the rooks. Connecting the rooks doesn't mean you automatically win. You know, it would be great if I could just connect the rooks, stop the clock, and tell my opponent it's over. I win because I connected first. But when the rooks are connected and there are still power pieces left on the board, then clearly they're not on the back row. Otherwise, the rooks would not be connected. So right now, all of these rooks are very, very far away from connection, but I want you to pay close attention how both sides work this interesting middle game and get those rooks connected. Okay, now let's look at the game. Rather than getting their pawn back, white just castles. And when they castle, they're telling black, look, I'm going to give you a chance to hang on to your extra pawn, but when you do that, you're going to have to still live with your king on this funny square. So black is kind of up for the challenge and just develops the queen. And notice that when the queen comes out, let's go back, there's one less piece between the 2 rooks. So queen comes to f6. White's turn. White puts pressure on the weak pawn by playing rook e1, and the rook is paying attention to the pawn structure. The pawns tell the pieces where they can and cannot go. It's a very important concept. They're like little road maps. Because the E file is half open, Luca, stop pulling your sister's hair. Such a good chess player, he won't leave his sister alone. Anyway, let's go back. The rook comes to e1. Pressure on the pawn. Black said, you know what? I want to get my bishops into the game. I'm going to put my bishop on d6, protect my extra pawn. For the moment, this bishop looks a little lazy. It actually looks like a big pawn, but it's serving a purpose. It's protecting the extra pawn. White develops the knight. Remember, it cannot come here because you'll lose a piece, so the knight comes to d2, and white brings another piece off of the back rank. Now, some of you tacticians, this was the move that was played in the game. The bishop just came to e6 and covered all the light squares in the middle of the board. Some of the tacticians in the room are like, well, why can't we in this position play bishop f5 and win a pawn? Because that's a skewer. When the queen moves, let's say it goes to e2, can't we go right through where the queen was and pick off a pawn? Well, I actually put this in the blog. You can take the pawn, but then the queen just magically jumps over the knight and takes the bishop. You see? Now, if I let go of this, did you hear that whistle? Yeah, that's because the machine is making a sound when I make an illegal move, but I can take that bishop. I just give you a check. That bishop is loose, and now it's cooked like a goose. Oh, man. Wow, I'm like in a holiday mood. These jokes are just incredible. Don't skewer and take the pawn. So black just centralizes the bishop. Very good. Black's turn. Why not move the knight into the game with a little trick? With a little trick. You see how that rook and queen are kind of pointing down at this bishop? Well, if you just play some random move like a6, for example, then black can actually take a pawn. And when you take back, the knight will take, and if the pawn takes, you see how that pin comes to play now? Now the queen just takes, and do the math. It's completely equal now in terms of material. Black can bring the king out and bother the rook, but I don't think white or black, white would love this, pardon me, but black, I don't think black wants to go for this. So as soon as that knight came there, this is a master, a very strong one playing black. He sees this, so he doesn't want this bishop getting caught in this mess. So what does he do? He brings a rook behind the bishop. Okay, makes sense to you guys? Perfect. Bishop comes to d2. Look at that. Look at the two white rooks. See what we're talking about? And now bishop f5. And after bishop f5, I'll put on some highlights. This whole diagonal is still open. So you have to be ready for the check, which comes. White plays the check. But if you remember from the example I gave before from that center fork trick, black doesn't mind this check because after queen to d5, you see that line now, right? This rook is loose. The king just goes to h7. And what happened to the black rooks? Look at the white rooks. You guys see how these masters play these middle games? Just get those pieces out. At the beginning, if you're kind of jammed up, take your time, get the pieces into the game. Okay, white to play. Here, I think white was a little frustrated being down a pawn, and these two pawns in the middle are so powerful. They're keeping all these, the minor pieces out of the game, and maybe white wants to go, black wants to take this pawn at some point, but white goes for some counterplay on this side of the board, coming after the undefended b pawn. And black had no interest in playing a move like rook to b8, bringing it off that line to protect the pawn. Instead, he plays the move rook h to f8. And what does that do? With rook h to f8, you see the lines that I just turned on? Look at that pawn way up here on f2. If you're playing black, all you have to do is move this bishop, and that knight is going to be glued to that square, because if the queen ever gets a chance to take that pawn, probably going to be bad news for white, right? Watch how this takes place. Queen takes b7, hitting the knight, which is now unprotected, and black ignores it and goes for what I just told you before and plays the move e4, kicking the knight. Now you may ask after e4, can the white queen take the knight on c6? It looks like it might just be a knight trade. It won't. It's really, really bad. I think you guys can see what would happen if the queen takes on c6. Now look at the two queens. Check. Ouchie. Not good. So after the move e4, white had a problem. What to do with the knight? Not many squares to go. If the knight takes the pawn like it did in the game, black took, white took, and this leads to a winning position. I had somebody a while back who saw this game who had a different move for the white knight. Let's go back to e4. Here. I've had people say, well, wait a minute, why can't we just put the knight here, like in the game, or why not put it on the side of the board and offer black a chance to just take it, right? Because if you take my knight, then I'll take yours. Well, if that happens, if you take the knight, white cannot take this knight. There is a beautiful forced checkmate, and I put this in the blog as well. Stop your video or set this up on a chessboard. That would really, really be nice, and figure out the checkmate. Okay, if you did pause the video, it should have looked something like this. Queen check. This is all forced. This is a beautiful checkmate. Look at all of the black pieces, the two rooks, the two bishops, and Big Mom up here. This king has no chance. All of the defending pieces are on the, like in Canada, and all the good stuff is going on here in the States. No way the king can survive. King F1, we give a little check with the queen. The king only has one move, and now just an absolute gorgeous check. Bishop check. No moves for the king. The only way to get out of check is to block with the F-pawn. So what do? We just take it with the bishop. Not good. If the bishop is captured, we have a checkmate. Let's go back. The only other move in this position, I think we can move the king to this square, would be the only other move. But then we just simply, what? Yeah. Isn't that nice? Beautiful checkmate. Here. See if you can calculate it one more time. Very good. Okay, let's go back to e4. That pawn center of blacks was so strong in this game that, white saw that attack, so really had no choice and just took the pawn in the middle. And now white is going to be down a piece after knight takes d4. The black queen can simply just take the knight, and now black will be up a piece and completely winning. But they found such a beautiful move. If you look, you remember this f-pawn up here? Remember we talked about that before? If we could get the knight to move that was here, we did that. And if this bishop somehow magically disappeared, there would be trouble up here. Can you find what black did here? Really cool move. Yeah, bishop c8. Didn't take the extra knight. Instead, just move the knight, the bishop back, attack the queen. She goes to d5. The queen takes on f2 check. The king goes to h1. And my favorite piece in the game, I mean, it's such a cool piece. Bishop h3. What? What is that about? Well, it's checkmate on g2. This is not easy to defend. Plus, there's a whole bishop attacked here. So if you guard this pawn with a rook, I'm going to just snap off another piece. And if you take my bishop, well, you know how the story goes. Listen, you guys are the best. Do the videos, watch the videos, eat the videos. I don't care what you do with them, all right? But do them. Solve some puzzles. I'll see you folks in 2 weeks. Keep up the good work.